That's rough to watch. We're back with Captain Lee and Kate Chastain of Below Deck. Now, Kate. Captain Lee ruled Below Deck for 10 seasons. Then one day, he couldn't feel his left leg or his left arm. The cameras kept rolling while he held onto walls just to walk. Insurance companies started making phone calls. Producers had secret meetings. By season 10, the man who never missed a day at sea was using crutches on deck. But that wasn't why he left. The real reason came in a text message he never saw coming. After 74 years, the stud of the sea discovered even legends can be replaced overnight. Harold Lee Rosbach wasn't born on a beach or raised near a port. He came into the world on November 15, 1949, in Saginaw, Michigan, a city surrounded by land, lakes, and long winters. He was the second oldest of 7 kids in a working-class family. His father had a steady job in the automotive industry. His mother ran the house. Life was simple, structured, and entirely disconnected from the sea. The closest thing to adventure was maybe a weekend fishing trip or skipping stones at the riverbank. No boats, no harbors, no sailors in the family. And yet that boy from a landlocked town would one day become the most famous yacht captain on television. Looking back, it feels almost like a prank by fate, but somehow it happened. He graduated from Arthur Hill High School in 1967, with nothing more than a diploma and small-town dreams. Back then, the biggest water he'd ever seen was probably Lake Michigan. He had never smelled salt water, never seen the tide roll in. The ocean wasn't just far away in miles, it didn't exist in his world. Decades went by, life moved on, and it wasn't until he was nearly 40 years old that he finally stood in front of the sea for the first time. Imagine that. Most people by that age are already locked into a routine, married to their job. But Lee's life hadn't even started yet. Not the part that would define him. Before boats came burgers. In the early 70s, Lee found work as a Wendy's manager. He was 22 and running a crew of teenagers in a fast-paced kitchen where stress came hot and fast. It wasn't glamorous, but it taught him a lot. How to stay calm in chaos, how to lead under pressure, and how to solve problems on the fly. Skills like those don't go out of style. Years later, he'd be standing on the deck of a super yacht, navigating storms, managing demanding guests, and keeping a multi-million-dollar operation running smoothly. Different uniform, same pressure. The foundation was built over a deep fryer. His personal life followed a path just as unexpected. He met Mary Ann while still in high school, but she remembered their first meeting a lot better than he did because he didn't remember it at all. Luckily, they met again, and that second time, something just clicked. In her words, that was it. They got married and stayed married for over 45 years. Through career changes, relocations, and storms, both literal and emotional, Mary Ann stood by him. She was there when he was running restaurants. She was there when he first stepped onto a yacht, and she's still there today. Sometimes the real love story isn't fireworks. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and built to last. During his 20s and 30s, Lee was fully focused on the land. After his fast food stint, he poured his energy into the restaurant world. He built and managed multiple locations across Indiana, Georgia, and Florida. Payrolls, suppliers, menus, he knew the grind well. At one point, he was running a full-fledged restaurant empire. And still, the sea never crossed his mind, not once. He was a businessman with bills to pay, not a sailor chasing sunsets. But then, in Florida, something changed. An opportunity came up on a boat. He took it. From 1982 to 1984, Lee Rosbach lived through 2 of the hardest years of his life. He wasn't a captain yet, just a mate working brutal shifts on whatever boat would take him. His days lasted 12 to 16 hours. Some days it was scorching Caribbean heat over 95 degrees. Other days it was freezing, battling 30-foot waves in the North Atlantic. He cleaned out bilges filled with diesel and human waste. He scraped barnacles off hulls while sharks circled in the water. He threw up constantly from seasickness and lost more than 20 pounds in just 3 months. There were no shortcuts. He had to lift anchor chains that weighed hundreds of pounds. He climbed rigging in 40-knot winds. He crawled into engine rooms so hot they hit 120 degrees. But the physical side was just one part. He had to learn maritime law. He had to understand weather patterns, radio codes, safety drills. One mistake could cost lives. On one trip in 1983, a Category 2 hurricane slammed into their ship near the Bahamas. He didn't sleep. For 18 straight hours, he battled 8-foot waves and followed emergency protocols he had barely memorized. Those 2 years were hell, but they changed him. They built him. And in 1984, all of it led to one small moment that changed everything. At 35 years old, he paid just $35 for his captain's license. That was the fee, just $35. But behind it was nearly $15,000 spent on training, equipment, and exams. And behind that, 2 full years of suffering at sea. The same day he got the license, he walked away from his old life. He had been running a restaurant. It still owed more than $40,000. He just left it behind. No backup plan, no safety net. Just one certificate and a belief that he could make a living on the water. Lee started small. He worked on 70- and 80-foot boats, learning the ropes, building his skills, and climbing the ladder, step by step. Every time he moved to a bigger boat, he had to upgrade his license and prove himself all over again. This wasn't just about getting a better job. It was about completely reinventing himself. He left dry land behind and slowly became the man who would one day be trusted with ships worth tens of millions. Between 2010 and 2013, his career hit full throttle. He was now in charge of massive super yachts, real floating palaces. Each one came with a team of 10 to 15 crew members and price tags that would make most people blink. The Benetti Cuore di Leone, a 50-meter masterpiece, was valued at $15 to $20 million. It cost another $1.5 million every year just to operate. That yacht would later become famous under the name Honor in the first season of Below Deck. Lee wasn't just steering ships. He was managing the lives of the ultra-rich. One client demanded a $10,000 suckling pig flown in from New Zealand to Baltimore just for a party. Another wanted a full-blown foam event on the sun deck. Every trip was like running a luxury hotel, a nightclub, and a 5-star restaurant all at once while still obeying international maritime laws. Handling all this pressure, Lee developed his signature leadership style: strict, fair, and direct. He hired people based on skill, not background. "I don't care what color you are or who you sleep with," he said. "I hire on merit, and I fire on lack of merit." He learned to listen more and speak less, which didn't come easy for someone used to giving orders. But when you're stuck with a crew for months in tight spaces, communication matters. Above all, he believed in full responsibility. "This is not a democracy," he once said. "No one gets a vote. If I make a mistake, I live with it and I die with it." It wasn't about ego, it was about the job. If something went wrong at sea, the captain was the last line of defense. By the time Lee hit his 60s, he was no longer just a captain. He was the captain. His clients included billionaires, celebrities, and royalty. These people could have chosen anyone, but they chose him. Why? Because he kept them safe. Even in terrifying storms where you couldn't see the sky or the horizon, he handled chaos with calm. That kind of trust can't be bought. It has to be earned wave after wave, year after year. His life before television was already a global adventure. He'd seen the Caribbean, the Mediterranean, Southeast Asia, even the wild remote waters near Tahiti. Every trip came with new challenges, medical emergencies, customs delays, weather disasters, and client demands that sounded more like fantasy than reality. He navigated all of it with precision. He didn't do it for the camera. He did it because that was the job. He never expected to become famous at 64. In 2013, Captain Lee Rosebuck was approached by Bravo to join a new reality TV show called Below Deck. At first, he didn't like the idea. He had spent more than 30 years working on luxury yachts far from the spotlight. The thought of cameras following him around while he did his job felt wrong. He had built a strict, no-nonsense reputation and didn't want television drama ruining that. But something about the offer made him pause. After years of hard work at sea, this might be a way to try something new. And the money didn't hurt. Eventually, he agreed. As soon as the first season aired, he became the unexpected star. Viewers couldn't get enough of his sharp attitude, straight talk, and signature glare. He didn't try to act for the cameras. He just kept doing his job. That's what made him different. Fans loved his serious tone, mixed with sudden, hilarious one-liners. They started calling him the stud of the sea, and the name stuck. He had a way of saying things that made people laugh and listen. When difficult guests acted out like the infamous Dolores Flora, Captain Lee handled them like a pro, never losing control, but always ready with the perfect sarcastic comeback. One of his most quoted lines, "I wasn't sure whether to hug you or slap you." Another classic, "We screwed the pooch so many times, we should have a litter of puppies running around." And let's not forget, "I'm madder than a pissed-on chicken." The internet exploded with memes. Fans began printing his quotes on t-shirts, mugs, and even pillows. Captain Lee leaned into it. He launched a merchandise line and even started selling personal video messages for $250 each. His rough but honest personality made him more than a TV character. He became a pop culture icon. For 10 full seasons from 2013 to 2023, he stayed at the helm of Below Deck. While other cast members came and went, he remained the Rock. Over the years, he earned between $95,000 and $130,000 per season, not including tips and side income. He published a book in 2018 called Running Against the Tide, and fans bought it just to hear more of his stories. By the end of his run, his estimated net worth reached around $1.5 million. But fame came with a cost. After back surgery, he started having nerve problems and mobility issues. During season 10, he had to step away from the yacht mid-season. In 2023, Bravo quietly announced he wouldn't return. Their official reason? They were going in a different direction. It didn't sit well with fans. Through all of it, one person stayed by his side. Mary Ann, his wife of nearly 50 years. She wasn't just a background character. When she appeared on the show, fans saw a completely different side of Captain Lee. He softened around her. Crew members described them as cute and like high school sweethearts. Their story went way back. Mary Ann had once worked as a chief stewardess under him, the only crew member he ever had a romantic relationship with. She joked that when they first met, he didn't even remember her. But their second meeting clicked, and they never looked back. Even with long stretches apart due to his work at sea, they kept their marriage strong. He once said, "If she's got a smile on her face, my day is complete." That kind of loyalty and love gave fans something rare on reality TV, a real relationship that actually lasted. While Below Deck often showed messy flings and drama-filled breakups, Captain Lee and Mary Ann quietly reminded everyone what commitment really looked like. He was a father of 5, but to his kids, he felt more like a legend than a man. Captain Lee Rosebuck spent 30 years at sea, working 8 to 10 months out of every year on luxury yachts. His wife, Mary Ann, raised their 4 sons and 1 daughter mostly on her own, while Lee sailed across the world. He missed birthdays, graduations, school plays, even first steps. Back in the 80s and 90s, when there were no FaceTimes or easy phone calls, he would vanish for months. His kids heard from him only through rare calls or postcards from Monaco or the Mediterranean. His oldest son, Josh, once said, having Lee as a dad was like having a ghost father. You knew he was real, but he was never there. One of his sons, Sean, was born in 1985. He saw what that life did to their family. Still, when he grew up, he chose to follow the same path. In 2008, Sean became a yacht chef, working in tight galley kitchens aboard $100 million super yachts. He was paid well, $6,000 to $8,000 a month, but lived in rooms smaller than prison cells. He cooked $500 meals for billionaires while being thousands of miles away from the people who mattered most. It was like watching the past repeat in real time. He took his father's restaurant roots and mixed them with his maritime bloodline. And the result was painful, a second rosebuck chasing waves and leaving family behind. Then, in May 2019, something shifted. Lee flew all the way back from France during filming of Below Deck Mediterranean to attend his granddaughter, Bra's, graduation. It cost the show $15,000 to rearrange schedules and flights. But for the first time, Lee picked family over work. Bree, Josh's daughter, had just finished her degree in hospitality, the same field that had pulled Lee away from his family for decades. He cried during the ceremony. At 69, the captain who had missed so much was finally trying to show up. He told People magazine he was trying to be the grandfather I never was a father. It was a moment filled with guilt, but also hope. From 2015 to 2017, Lee faced the physical cost of his long career. He had 3 major foot surgeries, 2 in 2015, 1 in 2017, to repair the damage from decades spent standing on unsteady yacht decks. Ligaments were torn, bone spurs removed. The procedures cost him $47,000, and during recovery, his main support wasn't a child or sibling. It was his 12-year-old rescue dog, Samantha. She had been with him since 2014 and never left his side, even sleeping next to his hospital bed. While he'd commanded crews of 20 or more, in his most vulnerable state, he had only a dog. It showed how deep his isolation ran. In 2017, the man who ruled luxury yachts and reality TV found himself broke. He filed for bankruptcy while Below Deck was in its 5th season. Despite earning $95,000 from the show and income from charters, his finances were a wreck. He had $847,000 in debt and only $23,000 in assets. Among the debts, $340,000 to the IRS from failed restaurants in the 80s, $180,000 in medical bills, $127,000 in credit cards, and $200,000 in legal fees. He didn't own a house. His car was a 2008 Honda Civic worth $3,200. He had $847,000 in his bank account. His monthly income was $7,800, but his expenses were $12,000. While millions watched him on TV navigating multi-million-dollar yachts, in real life, he was drowning. Then came the worst moment of all. On July 22, 2019, Lee drove to check on his 42-year-old son, Josh, at his home in Fort Lauderdale. Josh had battled addiction for 2 decades, but seemed to be improving. He had cleaned up his record, bought a car, and held a job. Lee thought they'd finally turned the corner. But Josh was dead. The autopsy said it was accidental poisoning. He'd taken an opioid laced with fentanyl without knowing it. Lee later said that parents are not designed to bury their kids, and yet that's exactly what he had to do. 1 year later, on July 22, 2020, Lee posted a tribute on Instagram that left people in tears. He wrote about how he and Mary Ann were still struggling. "We will always carry you in our hearts," he told Josh. They had taken Mary Ann's wedding ring and replaced the diamond with a heart-shaped piece holding Josh's ashes. His name was inscribed on it, and the ring was sealed shut. She now carried part of her son with her every day. Lee thanked fans for their kindness and said it touched him in the depths of my soul. But the pain didn't stop. Just days after that tribute, scammers began pretending to be Lee online, creating fake accounts to trick fans and make money off his grief. He had to go public, warning people not to trust anyone without the official checkmark. He said he was furious, grieving a son while trying to protect others from being exploited. It was one of the ugliest moments of an already devastating year. After Josh's death, Lee took all that pain and turned it into a mission. He became a public voice in the fight against opioids. On national TV, he talked about how addiction sneaks in quietly. "Nobody says, 'I want to be a drug addict,'" he explained. He said people with cancer get support, but addicts get shame. He called for real reform, not 45-day programs, but long-term ones, 1 or 2 years, that actually give people a chance. He even joined fundraisers like the 14th annual Salarulos Race for Champions to honor Josh and raise money for others. Still, the grief changed him forever. Lee now admits he's not the same. "I don't laugh much anymore," he said. "I hate going to sleep and I hate waking up." People say time heals, but Lee disagrees. Time, he says, only teaches you how to cope. The guilt lingers. What if I'd gone to his house sooner? He asks himself again and again. His career gave him money, fame, and a legacy. But it also took away moments he can never get back. The ocean can be unforgiving. That became terrifyingly clear one afternoon in Tahiti during Season 6 of Below Deck. Deckhand Ashton PNR made one wrong move. He stepped into the bite of a tow line. It was a Spectra line, a type that doesn't stretch and doesn't break. The moment it wrapped around his ankle, he was yanked off the 703-ton yacht and dragged underwater at nearly 6 knots. The boat was still moving, the line pulling with unstoppable force. If the engines hadn't been cut immediately, Ashton's leg would have been torn clean off. Captain Lee later said it. Ashton had 30 seconds before bleeding out would have made rescue impossible. The real hero wasn't part of the crew. Cameraman Brent Freeberg, without hesitation, dropped his camera and released the tow line. That single action saved Ashton's life. Even years later, Ashton said watching the footage made him feel cold all over. He had mentally prepared for his foot to be ripped off. That wasn't drama, it was the truth. Captain Lee didn't take it lightly. When Ashton was finally pulled back on board, Lee didn't know whether to hug him or scream. "I feel like doing both," he said. It was one of the most traumatic moments in his 35 years at sea. What hit him hardest was the irony. Ashton had just warned the crew never to step into that kind of line. Then he did exactly that. Lee later admitted he couldn't stop thinking about what he'd have said to Ashton's parents. That thought alone haunted him for months. To make sure it never happened again, Captain Lee gathered the entire crew to watch the incident on CCTV, frame by frame. It wasn't about blame, it was a lesson in survival. The footage showed 3 things that saved Ashton: Riley Gerber's quick radio call, the boat being thrown out of gear, and Brent cutting the line. Lee reminded everyone, without radios, Ashton would have died. The message was clear. Carry your radio. It's the only thing standing between life and death. But danger didn't just come from the crew. In Season 8, a guest named Dolores pushed things too far. After too much wine, she jumped into the ocean at night, against direct orders. Captain Lee exploded. "Get your goddamn ass back to this boat now," he yelled. It was the angriest anyone had ever seen him, but it wasn't about disrespect. It was about survival. "If something goes wrong out there, we'll never find you," he warned. Darkness at sea is like being swallowed whole. Dolores didn't care. She even jumped off the tender later. One final act of defiance. Lee just sighed. "I knew she was going to get the last FU in." Then came the biggest storm of all. Captain Lee's body started to fail him. In Season 10, The 73-year-old captain revealed his entire left side had gone numb. Not tingling, not sore, completely numb. "My injury, it's getting worse. I don't feel anything," he said. He had spinal stenosis. The nerves in his back were being crushed. After surgery, he hoped for improvement, but things got worse. By December 2022, he couldn't feel his left leg or arm. He was navigating a moving yacht, one of the most dangerous workplaces in the world, with half his body completely offline. The surgery he had was supposed to help. It didn't. Doctors said it should have relieved pressure on the nerves, but for Lee, it had the opposite effect. He couldn't do his job, couldn't even walk across the deck without holding onto the walls. He told the cameras, "I'm no longer an asset. I'm a liability." Those words crushed him. His entire life had been about protecting his crew. Now, he had become the risk. Seeing him hobble around the boat on crutches was heartbreaking. He told the chief stew, "I'll probably use the crutches tonight. I'd hate to do a 1.5 on the way out." Even his cane wasn't stable anymore. The man once called Stud of the Sea was clinging to handrails when he said, "This has probably been one of the most humbling experiences of my life." No one doubted him. Every step was a reminder that the ocean doesn't care how experienced you are. It'll take you out just the same. Behind the scenes, things got complicated. The show couldn't insure a captain with severe mobility issues. When the series first began, Captain Lee had only been brought on because insurance companies rejected the original choice. Now, with his health in decline, those same concerns returned. Captain Sandy Yawn was brought in to replace him. It was the first crossover in the franchise's history. She had her own leadership style, more hands-on, more involved, and she inherited not just a yacht, but someone else's crew, and the pressure of running a TV show at the same time. That tension came to a head when Sandy fired crew member Camille Lamb. Captain Lee, still recovering, was furious, not because of the firing itself, but because he wasn't told. "Had I been replacing her, I would have called first," he said. He didn't need permission. Just respect, Sandy defended herself. "He was in the hospital," she said. "You think I'm going to call and say, 'Can I fire Camille?'" Their public spat turned into one of the biggest feuds the franchise had ever seen. It didn't help that she didn't invite him to her wedding months later. That snub said more than any tweet. Then came the final blow. Lee wasn't asked back. No announcement, no grand farewell, just silence. At 74, he revealed, "I didn't quit. I didn't retire. I was just not invited back." He'd heard all the PR phrases. They want to move in a new direction, but he knew what that meant. It was a firing. The producers weren't sure if his health would improve, and they couldn't wait. Captain Carrie Titheridge was brought in, a 41-year-old from Below Deck Adventure, young, energetic, safe. The shift was announced at BravoCon 2023, catching everyone off guard. Lee was graceful. He told Carrie, "Just be yourself on TV." But the message was clear. His decade-long reign was over. Still, Lee didn't leave quietly. He moved on to host Deadly Waters, a true crime series. It wasn't yachting, but it gave him a new purpose. And maybe, just maybe, if the new season's ratings tank, Lee said he'd be willing to come back.